It feels like I'm doing God's work. I'm doing what I was set on this planet to do. And I think a lot of people, and I don't know the statistics, but it's ridiculously high of people who don't have a purpose. They don't ever know what it is, and they are not happy. And I think that's really just a human need. That was like, what am I here for? Like everyone asks, dude, 99,000 searches a day, a second. I'm sorry. Every single second, 99,000 searches on Google. What are people looking for, bro? What? It's like purpose, man. They're looking for purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very excited for this week's guest, Mr. Erik Cabral. Erik, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. Oh, thank you so much for having me, brother.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm really excited for today's discussion because I think it's going to be able to help, anyone in their business journey, on their real estate journey in a lot of different ways. Really, we're going to talk about marketing and brand building, and whether that's from a personal brand perspective, which is a topic I really love to talk about, because we're always building our personal brand, but also from a business or corporate brand. So I'm really excited about the discussion. For our listeners, Erik, he's from Jersey, family. He's married with 2 girls, 7 and 10. He's, as I mentioned, a leading expert in brand development, founder of On Air Brands and Be Your Brand. And he's just dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, as I said, develop their personal and corporate brands, also in the process of writing a book, which I'm also thinking about, but is always a process. So I'm excited to get into this, Erik, and I want to hear more about your story and how it evolved into what you're doing today.
Yeah, appreciate that, brother. So it all really came to a crashing halt for me when I took the purple pill. You know, the Kiyosaki book, obviously, that's really runs rampant throughout our community, and you hear it all through Bigger Pockets. But it really was the catalyst for me leaving corporate America, realizing I was on a hamster wheel, and I was financially illiterate. And I'll never forget the day where I was listening to the audiobook and I was driving to my 1.5 hour commute, and it was like I was punching the steering wheel literally out of anger and frustration, but also inspiration to change my life and to become literate and start investing and get into the ESBI, and not realizing I was always stuck in one of the quadrants. So that was life-changing for sure. That was a big aha moment. And then it brought basically me here to you, where I started to invest, not really clearly knowing that I was going to continue on the creative path. I thought I started loving analyzing deals, sourcing deals, doing ride-alongs with seasoned investors, eventually grabbing a multifamily within less than a year of committing to it. So I was like, whoa, I'm doing it. I can't believe it. And then I was surrounded by a bunch of abundance-minded people that I had never experienced. I was always around scarcity, around the barbecue, always talking trash about people, always just struggling. And now I was around a community of people that were struggling, but in business, less in life, but struggling around like, oh, how do I take care of my family? How do I be more present and also build millions of dollars in wealth? So that was like a different conversation. I was like, oh man, how do I learn more? Oh, I'll start a podcast and interview people and pick their brains. That's really what it was about. And then all of a sudden, these real estate investors loved their episodes, not necessarily my show, but they're like, hey, dude, I sounded great. Can you do that for other people? I'm like, I never really thought about it. I do have systems and processes that I've developed. Sure, let's try it. 1 became 2, became 3, and then doing for me became doing for we. And all of a sudden I was like, I think I have a podcast agency, which originally was a creative agency doing logos, branding, marketing, social media marketing. That's what it was for, because that's all I knew from my corporate past.
a couple questions, but one is creative side. What were you in the corporate world? What do you do in the corporate world?
Yeah, I was developing brands
Okay.
for Fortune 100s, Fortune 500s, all the big. I was really loving, working for the Coca-Colas, the American Airlines, and then the big pharmas eventually when I moved to New Jersey.
Yeah.
And they have their own internal brands. So we would do a lot of that. I was a part of internal ad agency that was 5 people strong. And then at, within 2 to 3 years or less, it got to 150. So that growth was wild to
Yeah.
watch. And we became the biggest creative agency, internal creative agency in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
So learned a ton there, and then that became my niche, like jumping from different big pharma to the other to help them build internal creative agencies. Eventually going to the top of the food chain, the ladder, which was being a creative director. So that was always my dream job. And when I got there, bro, I was like, where's my corner office? Where's my multi 6-figure salary? Why am I grinding so hard? And that's when the purple pill came about.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I'm burning
Well,
out.
and I want to come back to that because I think it's so interesting how many people, so real estate and how it evolves. Real estate is a vehicle, is not necessarily people that invest in real estate. Like real estate offers so many different financial benefits. And it's also, I think, you can earn passive income very passively relative to a lot of businesses. I think that's very, very real about real estate. It's a great long-term wealth building vehicle. But a lot of people that figure it out don't end there necessarily, or to me, the term financial freedom, it's really okay. I want to get financial freedom so I can really evolve that into more freedom of purpose of what I really want to do. And it seems like that, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that was kind of the evolution where you kind of you were focused in your corporate world and your branding role, creative director. You picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad. You focused on real estate, but at some time it came back to fulfilling that creative part of your mind or whatever it was. So I guess is that accurate, or correct me where I misstated that?
No, well, that's 100% accurate. But the other cool thing that it unlocked for me um, was, like you said, was purpose, mission, um, and not worshiping money, but honestly worshiping God. At some point, I started to realize as I'm getting these opportunities to speak on stages, on podcasts, getting more and more visibility, the temptation was there to just amass wealth in terms of materialism and earthly things. And I just didn't feel like that was fulfilling, man. I felt like there was still a void. And I was like, man, this doesn't feel right. Like I'm not taking any of this with me. So then, of course, started to ask the questions. And what's also cool about this environment that we're in is it affords us, like, we start to realize the real wealth is time. And we when we have more of it, we have more time to reflect. We have more time to put into ourselves, more time to put into our families. So as I started to amass time as my wealth, man, then I started to explore more scripture. I started to the door started to open to more opportunities where I can hear and get my prayers answered. Things like that where I was like, oh, in corporate America, it's not designed for us to have clarity because you're just grinding it out, dude. There's like so much noise. And then you're like, oh, I'm so tired. I can't even think when I get home. Let me just binge on Netflix. Let me
Yeah,
just go make myself a drink. Let me smoke something. Let me eat something. It's all this distraction that isn't designed for the betterment of ourselves spiritually, mentally, healthily, physically. So now I'm like, yeah, I'm like, wow, I was exposed to these folks that I never would have been exposed to. And I've come to realize, Phil, I used to adopt, this is recent, this is literally yesterday. I want to be around like-minded people. It's less about I want to be around like-minded people. Now it's more I want to be around like-valued people,
yeah,
people who have the same values. And that's a game changer. When I had come to that realization just yesterday, I'm like, this is where the rubber meets the road because now I'm finding more people that I can help that we all kind of jam on the same exact thing.
man. So there's a lot of different things there I want to jump to. First of all, maybe just a comment like-minded. What's neat about business and entrepreneurship is you can build your core values and you can, first of all, your network, your association is so hard, so important. So finding like-minded individuals, networks, other business leaders, business owners, real estate investors, whatever it is, I think is so important. But also clarifying your core values as you build your team is so important, because I don't want to only make my team better. I do want to make my team better, but I also want my team to make me better by
Mhm.
coming into work every day and working with them. But the other thing you talked about was, you said we're not really looking for freedom of money, we're looking for freedom of time. And I think there's this freedom of money maturation process that eventually led to you saying, I don't worship money anymore. But I think until you start to evolve through the financial freedom, freedom of money, whatever it is, process, you almost can't realize that.
Mhm.
Maybe you can, better people than me probably can realize that. But I feel like I went through the same process where once I started to have a little bit more money and flexibility there, I realized that's not what it's about. It's about freedom of time, freedom of purpose, bigger things. So you didn't figure out like the not worship money thing right away. What was that process like for you?
Man, it's really tough because that's how we're raised, right? That's how the machine works. Trade time for money. So it was baby steps, little things, little sayings here and there that I started to adopt. This guy by the name of Garrett Gunderson said, um, money, the value of money, is how much time basically it saves you. And that's where you place the value. I'm totally butchering it. I used to say it. I used to know it by heart. But he equated it less with the time and hourly, but more like what value is driven behind like what service you provide, so like I was like, okay, wow. That's definitely a shift. Let me move more into that. And then I started to look at like my hires and less looking at their time, but looking for the results that they're going to give me. And if they can accomplish those results in 5 hours in a week, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
That's cool. And then I started to value how much time people would save me. And that's where I sort of started to look at what I was investing in them versus like, okay, hey, oh, industry standard says you make $100,000 a year. Therefore, it's like, no, now it's more about, are you affording me more opportunities to hang with my family? To go to medieval times tomorrow and hang with them and spend the whole day versus, like now I got to worry about like who's doing this, who's doing that, who's doing that. Yeah, you're right. It was a little by little that where I started to realize, oh, um, it's not about the money anymore. I have passive income that takes care of those things and I just need to do more of that. And when I got to the degree where, yeah, this is affording me time to invest in myself now and find myself and my purpose. That's where it was a game changer. Just less chasing things and being stressed about chasing things.
Yeah. How do you, I don't think we've talked about this here. We talked about value of time and stuff, but do you like, are you one of the, do you put a dollar value on your time? Like saying, hey, if it's X dollar, or it's just, no, this is a high value. Like I'm going to spend time with my daughters. So this is just irreplaceable time. How do you go through that process?
So with the business, yes, I have to put a dollar amount per hour just to, but there are times where um, that gets adjusted, depending on the solution, the problem that needs to be solved. So, but yes, to answer your question, to run the business, we have to have some sort of metrics and be able to deliver on service and results.
Awesome. So so you talked about purpose, and I guess when was there the shift, or what led to the shift? And I think what's probably more aligned to your, I don't know how much, if you're like, you're clear on what your purpose is right now and what you're doing this year, or you're clear on your purpose for the next decade. Like, I don't know where you stand on that. And different people are different areas, but, or different locations on the spectrum, if you will. But how did you come to, I guess, come back to the creative marketing? So you went to real estate and then you came back to creative marketing. What led you to that?
It was solving a need. There's more and more people demanding it, in marketing. There's that term, the market will dictate what they want, what they desire, and I found that there was something that we were doing and that I was doing that was clearly a problem for others. So once I came in with that solution, yeah, it built our company to the degree where now I can move towards more passion projects and then create those as money, income generating businesses as well. But now aligned with purpose, or aligned with something bigger than me. which is way more fulfilling than, working in a job or working at your own job. Sometimes we create our own prisons, that is purpose driven. And for me, purpose driven is aligning with God and doing things that glorify him, not me. Because that's the thing, was when I started speaking on stages and getting these opportunities, and it's not a human experience. It's not a normal human experience to step off stage and have people lining up to talk to you. That's just not a normal thing. And I recognized that. And when I started to realize, Phil, that it was feeding an ego within me that was destructive, I had to really reflect on that. And at the time, I called it meditation, because I didn't fully embrace, my faith in Christianity. But what I started to do is realize, oh wow, there's something bigger than me. This is not about me. This is not about feeding my ego. I don't want to speak on more stages and talk to more people, and see people, in tears in the audience. What am I saying? And then someone said to me, I'll never forget. He was like, dude, what it was you were in flow. And what I've recognized that to be is, dude, that's the Holy Spirit, brother. That is something else bigger than you that's actually channeling you and using you as a vehicle for
Yeah.
a message. And I was like, oh, I'm getting chills. That's what it is. I was like, oh, wow. Whenever you get chills in someone speaking, that's not a person, right?
Yeah.
They're channeling something greater.
Yep.
And you're receiving that at the right time. So when I realized, oh, I can just be a vessel for that, and I became clear on that, that's changed. That's a game changer, bro.
Yeah.
Changed
Man.
everything.
That is fantastic. And I think, it's just really interesting, because I think you talked about just being surrounded with people like not like-minded people, but like valued people. I think like this is where your network and like just I'm getting excited about this discussion. Like we're ramping up here
Yeah.
as you get into this more and more. Like I want to be around you more. So I appreciate that. So I want to talk about, you know, what is that message to entrepreneurs, to business owners, to real estate investors on personal branding? Like help me, what is that? I get not personal branding, personal or business branding. What is that, and how do we be successful at that?
Yeah. So to start from a simple and easy point, branding is literally creating something that is recognizable, right? Whether it's through words or visuals. The visuals typically logo, a mark, or a brand, the Nike swoosh, or the word Nike. You don't even need to see it; you visualize it. But I've taken it and think of it also from the next level, which is deeper. And when you create a brand, it's your reputation. What are people saying when you're not in the room? What are people saying about the company when they're not in the office? Just the overall culture and the words and the values that you have put together to culminate a brand and a culture. I think that's powerful to be able to recognize what that is for you and what you want to represent. A lot of you walk into corporations, you'll see them in the conference rooms, right? Sometimes they have dozens of core values, but oftentimes with personal branding, people don't realize they can apply those same tools to themselves. And once you realize, and you and I talked about this earlier, it's like, what are your core values? We were like fitness, faith, family. What are they? And then once you become really clear on who and what you want to represent, um, putting it out there and putting it out there in a consistent way. So the best way in modern day with what we do is in terms of creating consistency around creating content is usually a podcast, because you're holding yourself accountable by releasing something weekly. And then if you're doing it right, you're taking that content and you're chopping it up into micro pieces of content. And then what that does is what I love to call digital breadcrumbs that lead to you, because now you're creating shorts, reels, posts, blogs, whatever it is, that's all derivative of that one thing you did, right? Talk about, creating efficiency within your business. If you can create a marketing flywheel and an ecosystem where I recorded this one thing and now I'm passing it off to a team, and this team is now chopping it up into sound bites, clips, video clips, a full podcast, blogs, you name it, it's out there every single day. And what you're doing is creating a sales force. So while you're sleeping, this content is still being fed to your potential clients and people that you can help. um, while you're doing nothing. And I remember the very first 2017, 2018, people would message me. I would open my phone in the morning and they'll go, "What are you doing? Go to sleep." And I'm like, I was sleeping. And they realized, oh, because somebody had posted for me at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
That wasn't me. But they didn't
Right.
realize there were systems and process at the time. Now people are more aware of VAs and then on in my company. Um, but yeah, it's a powerful thing, man. We're living in a really cool age.
Yeah. And I like, first of all, it's interesting because using the online world, if you will, now for branding is very like what you just explained was make you like we've heard the phrase making money while you sleep. Well, you're doing marketing while you sleep, basically, is
Yeah.
you're building this funnel and this strength of this funnel while you sleep. So how 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 should I compare that like personal branding to business branding? How should I think about those differently?
Yeah. So personal branding is a little tougher, especially if you are introverted, sort of private. Personal branding does require a level of vulnerability. And I would also say humility, because the most powerful brands share the losses, because there are lessons learned. If you're an egocentric, narcissist type of business leader, then you're not going to go reflect on your losses and extract lessons out of those. You're going to just blame it on someone else. But for those who do reflect and see those as, gold mines to find and extract the lesson, and then once you get to the degree where, okay, I've reflected on this enough, where now I can share this through content. Let me test drive it in a podcast, or let me test drive this in a blog or a newsletter, where I'm like, hey, I screwed this up royally a year ago. Don't make the same mistake that I did. So if you can position yourself in that, that's more personal branding, because then businesses don't necessarily say, "Hey, we failed at that," because then that, probably breaks a little bit of trust. People want to know that, they're going to get their house built correctly, versus somebody who's just saying, "Hey, I'm a vulnerable human being just like you." It's very relatable when you can create a personal brand that has clear core values that you dive all in on, like, "Hey, I want you to be financially literate and financially free like me." That resonates with people who want that too,
Yeah.
versus a company saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this for you." There's no face. There's just a logo. There's a name. Like, Elon Musk has millions and millions and millions of more followers than the brand Tesla or SpaceX. Like, those have their own followers for sure. But Elon Musk is who people come for. So that's where we want to go. Like,
Yeah.
your
And
brand.
yep. And I've heard the phrase like people want to see in interesting like where I'm on social media. There's more followers of me than my business, so I can at a very much smaller scale than Mr. Elon Musk. But I can relate to this because I struggled for a long time to even say, "Hey, I'm going to go do a podcast," and then social media. And right now, like how many videos there are of me out there, I've resisted or I've kind of just been probably overthink like how transparent, how vulnerable, how much like I'm claiming to be an expert. I don't want to be that, and I worry about that. But
Mm.
the question in the back of my mind, if we go back a couple of discussions ago that we had, is that my ego getting in the way? Like, is that like help me get over myself here, I guess.
Yeah. So your hesitancy to create content is, just clarify that for me.
Um, if I'm creating content, like I'm very comfortable creating content and posting things with you speaking and you being on the video reel and I'm in the
Right.
interview seat. But then for me to be the one talking and saying, "Hey,
You're
this
the
is how you
expert.
need to do this. This is how you need to do this." I've
Yeah.
I've gotten more comfortable with it, but I'm not like being really bold with it because I'm worried, oh, Phil just thinks he knows it all or whatever it might be. I worry too much about that.
Yeah. Well, it's less attached to ego, but then a good friend of mine, Matt O'Neill, said there's also false humility, and I'm not saying that this falls into that category, but there's also, especially in faith-driven people, where they're like, no, I'm not supposed to shine a light. I'm supposed to stay in the background. But there is also a side of it, and that encourages us to put those things out there because it's going to help someone. And it doesn't have to be a waving a finger and saying you should do this and you need to do that. It could be more from a humble vantage point, saying, "Hey, here's what I did. and I'm not saying that this is going to happen to you, but it could. And I experienced this. So it's just sharing your stories in real time or, reflecting on and saying, hey, I experienced this. M- Just wanted to make sure that you knew that this could happen.
Yeah, I like that. And from
Yeah.
the other thing I wrote down, first of all, I'm a Matt was on our podcast. Matt O'Neill, good guy. So
Yes.
he talked about the false humility. He might have corrected me on this a couple months ago, but you talked about faith a couple times, so I'll go there. If you think about personal brand and building that, Jesus, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
he had, he went into the towns, but then him speaking, he had followers. And to say, I don't think people are saying, oh, he did this because of it was an egotistical thing. It's all about obviously what he had a little bit more powers than we did too, but how he approached it with humility, things like that. So yeah, I've thought about that too, but I appreciate the guidance on trying to get me over this, and I'm still working towards it. So for the listeners, maybe if all of a sudden I come out with a ton of stuff here in the future, Erik really got to me. So I appreciate that. Um, I want to, I guess, on branding, as I think about that more, you're saying if I go back to the Elon Musk model or phrase, should business leaders that marketing is important to their business,
Mhm.
should they be also always building a personal brand in addition to their company brand, especially if it's like an owner that owns, just think small company or retail company, whatever it might be. Should should they be building a personal brand in addition to the business brand or not necessarily? How should they be thinking about that?
Yeah, it depends on the business owner. And so it's not one size fits all. It really depends on their desire or passion to share lessons learned. I have a lot of clients who they're like, I have tons of stories. I don't know how to share those things. A podcast could be a solution for that, or creating other type of content so that they can position themselves for what they eventually have other goals to speak on stages or to lead conferences, or they have a corporate coaching program, whatever it is, where um, they foresee building a personal brand is really going to elevate and help them position themselves as that thought leader for a road that they're trying to pave a road towards that goal. But if there's a business, and we have a lot of these as well, and I know a lot of business owners that just want to focus on the business and make sure that this is successful. And then when I get this and I check this box, oh, I create a 7, 8 figure business, then I have enough, hopefully, time, right? Because it doesn't necessarily need me. If they build the business correctly, it doesn't need them as much. Then they can go write that book or start that podcast or build the course, whatever it is. And they see it as two separate things. Um, you can go that route. For me personally, and I don't recommend this, and this is kind of falling in line with what you were saying. Um, um, if you want to learn lessons through my experience, is I did it both. I did them both at the same time. So I started a company from scratch, zero, to on our way to the 7 figure, is like, that's a challenge. And if I just focused on that, that would be enough. But I was like, no, let me build a personal brand at the same time. Let me write a book. Let me start a podcast. Let me do the things. And there's no right way. It's just making it harder because you're definitely building another business at the same time.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out, okay, do I want to allocate the capital towards building the brand, or the company brand, or do I want to allocate capital to my personal brand, or are they the same thing? A lot of people see them as the same thing. I see them as the same thing. But some people want to definitely compartmentalize, and
Yeah.
that's okay too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I've thought about is like right now, that what we're doing, we don't have from a personal branding perspective, I guess company branding, personal branding, we don't have a rock solid, like this is how I know for sure we're going to monetize this. I mean, we have investors, but I think if like our best branding for our investors is just perform on the stuff we have, and that will probably take care of itself. But we have a lot of ideas on how we can maybe monetize this, but I guess just kind of keep it open ended. Like, what are all the different ways from a business perspective, to monetize a personal brand, if that's the right way to be thinking about it?
Yeah. So the first phase, whenever we develop any personal brand, is always creating content, valuable content that solves a problem that most people are having in your industry. So that could be blogs, that could be newsletters, it could be a podcast that creates those newsletters and blogs, micro content, guesting on podcasts, things like that. Those are sort of the easier, lighter lift. And then once you do that, and you start to basically plant those seeds throughout the internet over time, people will find that stuff. I still get emails, texts from people going, "Hey man, I'd love to have you on my show. I listened to this episode." And I was like, that was 5, 6 years ago. So they're still fine. This stuff just lasts forever, right? So it's
Yep.
good. When you create content, it will work for you for a long time. And then eventually what you can do after that phase, because a lot of people want to jump right to like phase three and they want to start a $10,000 a year mastermind and they want to start speaking at conferences, things like that. I'm like, well, you didn't do anything in phase one and phase two to develop your brand or to build a reputation. Because if second phase, one of the things is creating courses. Now, how are you going to create a course and have peace? Sure, you can create a course. I'm sure you have a ton of experience in your business that you can help and kind of like systematically build that framework for others. It will help them. But if they Google you, we are who Google says we are. And if there's nothing, there's no trace, there's no digital reputation, brand, or anything, why would they pick you when they can go pick the next guy who has a personal brand, who does exactly what you do? So that's where I say, like, you got to plant the seeds first, build that reputation, the digital breadcrumbs leading to you, and then now you can turn the light on to that course, or that talk,
Yep.
I always say, uh, speak at any event for free, especially locally, because then now you can capture that content and take those pictures and build that credibility over time. So yeah, those are the things that I would say are the earlier sort of
So
steps to
phase
start
one
building
is
your personal
like
brand.
just start to create the content. Phase two, you really said, is like courses and speaking, is what I heard. And then phase three, I
Exactly.
guess in general, is monetizing it, whatever
Yeah, you
that
can.
means.
So you can start to monetize, I say, in phase two and three.
Okay.
When you're building courses, you're doing webinars, things like that, where you can turn the light on and say, "Hey, this is free." But because what we want to do is I'm guessing people in your audience knows Gary Vaynerchuk. Um, but he wrote a book called Jab, 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 Right Hook. And that's all about, it's really just give, 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 and then ask and then receive. So same thing within our mastermind, you and I, we know each other through GoBundance. And I was just literally talking to another Matt. There's a million Matts in the group, but one of them just texted me and he was like, hey, I'm considering renewing in 2025. I don't know yet. And he goes, but it's on me. And I said, for sure. I go, because the years that I've recognized where I didn't receive much or didn't gain a lot were the years that I didn't put anything into it. So
Yeah.
we get what we receive. If you add value over and over and over and over, people will eventually say, hey, I'm ready. How can we work together?
Yeah.
So yeah.
What I wanna shift gears a little bit. So first of all, I appreciate that in the phases and just yeah, it's reassuring for me too because I don't have all of phase two, phase three figured out. So we might have to talk a little bit after the call to help me figure it out. But
Yeah.
um, joking aside, I want to shift gears a little bit to you've talked about, you talked about network, but you've talked about faith. You've talked about some different major shifts in the way you think. And I guess, are there any things like any major mindset shifts that were yeah, just big shifts along the way that you're like, whether it was someone you talked to, a phrase, a book, a lesson, a failure, like what were some major mindset shifts for you throughout your path?
Yeah. Well, there were several. I mean, there's a lot, but the major ones was leaving corporate, and realizing we were stuck. A lot of us are stuck in that industrial system, which is conspiracy or not. I think a lot of these things turn into conspiracy fact. But why would the system create a bunch of Elon Musks? Right? People that think for themselves, critical thinkers, starting their own businesses, understanding that money is not tied to time but tied to value. Things like that. Like that was a mind shift. Reading that book and then several books after that. You know, and it's really hard, dude. If you are stuck like I was in an environment where it's like, okay, work, 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 drink, 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 party, party, party to alleviate the pain, and then rinse and repeat. Um, Raising a family was not good. That worked when I was single, but when I became a father, that's when I was like, whoa, I got to stop drinking. I got to stop smoking. I stop hanging with the people. that I used to party with. Like I'm a dad now, I'm a husband. So that was a major shift, is like becoming a family man and trying to be a better dad than my dad ever was. And then being intentional about that. How do I start a business that needs 82 hours of me a week and still be present as a father and a husband? I don't want a divorce at the end of this. I see a lot of people around me, right? They couldn't make the family thing work because
Right.
they went all in on the business. So I wanted to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So that was a major shift in starting, books and networks and people. Front Row Dads was great to help me with that. That's another networking group. And then dude, now the next phase that I'm currently in, as you may be able to tell, is something bigger than me, because my business can run without me. Financial freedom, all the things that I don't need to worry about anymore. I'm like, oh, now I have clarity because there's less noise. And I can see because there's less smoke. And when it cleared, that's when I found my bigger purpose, right? Which was give God the glory, not me. And that's when I was like, oh, I'm building a personal brand and helping other people build a personal brand. And that's all ego driven. And it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. And I was like, oh, wait, I got to build something that does that
Yeah.
because I'm doing it for myself.
Yeah. And I mean, generally speaking, people that are going on air podcasts, and maybe you're even filtering I don't know if you're filtering or thinking about your customers now, but they're hopefully sending a good message, and you getting your message out via like one podcast only versus influencing the impact of a lot of other people's podcasts. All of a sudden now you're having this big compounding and ripple effect where I wrote this down because you said like planting seeds, but you're planting seeds and you'll never know about them until after you die. Right.
Yes.
You won't know what happens to all the seeds you planted or what they led to until we're out of this world. Right. So I think it's really neat what you're doing. The other thing is, just to bring back to what you're talking about a couple minutes ago, my wife and I were talking about this, I think either last night or today, but like you were talking about the corporate world and leaving the corporate world and this just the mindset shift, but there's so many societal norms. Like the discussion my wife and I were having is, so from a health perspective, like are we too far? Are we too focused on it? Like, we weren't questioning it. We were just saying, I think people maybe think that because society in my opinion is so far in the other direction where the regular thing is drink a bunch on the weekends or drink a bunch at night and on the weekends. Don't exercise, sleep 5 hours a night, eat a ton of sugar, just eat like society. So then corporate world, like corporate, is that a right? A conspiracy fact, as you said. There's just so many, like the more you question everything that exists, I think the better. Like why does it really exist? And is it the right thing? So I don't know. It's just interesting. We were having that discussion from a health perspective, but I think it's so applicable to health, to your job, to what you do. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Um, what were you really scared of during this whole process? What was the biggest fear you had?
Yeah, that's a great question, Phil. I would have thought that it would be what people think. And that comes into my mind probably 3 to 5% of the time. And that's an exercise and a muscle that I've been developing over the course of several years now, where like I don't care what people think. And which seems counterintuitive to building a business. But what I've recognized, especially during 2020, is if you put out your real feelings and your real beliefs, you're going to attract more of that. You're going to attract more people that are aligned and go back to, calling back to what we were saying earlier, more like valued people. Because I had adopted your network is your net worth. Your network is your net worth. And then I did that. I accomplished that with GoBundance, but that was all purely seemingly monetary driven. A lot of chest pounding, and super successful people I saw go from 1 million to 10 million overnight. And by overnight, I mean 2, 3 years. And I'm so proud of my GoBros and people in my network that have elevated to that level. But dude, there was always a missing piece in a lot of people that I know who had to be that elevated monetarily, is they still had that missing purpose, mission driven. Like, what drives you, bro? What's bigger than that? Because we're not taking any of this shit with us in the afterlife. We're not taking, this is earthly. These are material, tangible things that are just gone. You're not taking it with you. So why?
Yep.
So like you said earlier, and as I started to read scripture, I realized like, so Paul was writing to the Galatians, Corinthians, all these people, but his main goal was for Greece to become Christians. He didn't live long enough to see they became one of the biggest Christian nations,
Right.
right? Especially within Athens, he was like, that was his dream. But like you said, our ripple effect in the work that I do and the work that we do with on air brands and creating more and more podcasts of people who have our mission driven and hopefully with God's purpose in mind is that, and I always sense that within my clients, if they're not outspoken about it, they're just great people, good natured, hearted people. We're never going to see the fruits of our labor, bro. Like we have kids, like they're going to carry it on. They're going to, and beyond that, and like the work that we do, good work is in the Bible, right? My faithful servant, it's like, that is the mission. And hopefully, others are coming to that revival and that realization, especially during 2020 when the crap hit the fan and like pure evil was coming out there in full form, dude, and nobody was recognizing it. People are still to this day not seeing the pure evil that's like, hey, here I am. And you're like, oh, I don't see it. Where is it? Where is he?
Right.
Like, it's
Right.
right in your face,
We didn't
bro.
learn. We went
It's
right. We went
right
straight
in your
back.
face. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So that's that's another reason that I went like, I need to find the light because there's darkness that's evident and I don't want to move towards that.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think it's a great segue. You're getting excited and I like it. Is like how if you just really step back and reflect about your career, what you've done, what you're doing, you seem very, you're just very purposeful. How does what you do, how does it make you feel?
Fulfilled. It feels like I I'm doing God's work. I'm doing what I was set on this planet to do. And I think a lot of people, and I don't know the statistics, but it's ridiculously high of people who don't have a purpose. They don't ever know what it is. I have people in my family that are in their 70s, 80s. They still never found their purpose and they are not happy. And I think that's really just a human need that was like, what am I here for? Like everyone asks, dude, 99,000 searches a day, a second. I'm sorry. Every single second, 99,000 searches on Google. What are people looking for, bro? What? It's like purpose, man. They're looking for purpose and they don't even know it. They're just like using distractions, TikTok and, sex and drugs and visuals. It's just a distraction, but
Well,
eventually you're going to need to find it.
and you need to be searching. And I think it feels so big. It feels so hard to figure out that people just go to TikTok, they go to booze, they go to other things, right?
Yeah.
But don't make it so big. Like don't try to solve it right now. Just start doing like move in a direction that the dots will connect for you if you move in a direction. Like you'll gain clarity as you go. There's fog, you're not sure. Walk into the fog, you'll eventually get through the fog, and then guess what? You'll be through the fog, and all of a sudden you'll find more fog. And you just need to build the muscle to go keep going. Just keep going. Paul did not have clarity as to where he was going or how it was going to get done. I mean, if you read,
He's
I'm
in
reading a
prison
book.
most of his life.
I'm reading a book right now on, I mean, he was incredible, the hardships he went through. And he had to be like, I mean, Asia got law, all kinds. There was a plan for him, but he didn't know it, right? He planted seeds, but he didn't know it. So just move in that direction. If you're feeling the itch to move in a different direction, like move in that direction and don't make it so big that you have to have it all figured out right now, but just move, just go. So I love it. You got my juices flowing there, Eric. I appreciate it.
I love it.
What do you think is going to be your key to? I want to wrap up here. We just got a couple minutes. What is you're going to be your key to success moving forward?
So yeah, I try to take it, like you said, one step at a time. This didn't happen overnight. I for sure was living in a secular world and lifestyle and enjoying it. But still there was a lot more misery than enjoyment. And then I've only recently come into my faith over the past couple of years. And then more specifically to loving Christ. But I will say, we have to take it step by step, like you said. And then this year was all about reduction and relationships, and reduction in the culinary sense, where you could reduce like ingredients, fruit, whatever, to its purest form, like very potent. So that was this year's theme. So I'm now evolving that into 2025's theme, which will be number one, partnerships. So looking for partnerships, anybody who's like podcast agencies, or personal branding agencies, or anything else, sales. And then I filter this, and this is work that I did with Matt O'Neill. He said higher purpose and filtering things. Am I doing this for higher purpose? But I've now evolved that to, am I doing this for God's glory? Am I creating this or doing this or saying yes or no to this because I'm filtering it through that? And then I realized, dude, the partnership is the first one is with God. So boom, that's done. Check that box. And then now I'm like, okay, every single other person that I partner with is through the lens. So yeah, 2025, man, it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be very clear and intentional with what we do.
I love it. I love it. Erik, this has been so good. Both, I mean, honestly, the story on your real estate, kind of the, like what real estate did for you, what it did for us. Like, I think we could connect on that, but really coming back to your passion, I would say your passion of marketing and branding, but also ultimately your purpose and the impact you're having and the seeds you're planting, I think is really, really cool. So I love how the discussion evolved, and I just keep going after it, keep doing what you're doing, because while I'm sure there are days you're working hard, you're getting things done, you're having an impact, and you're going to feel fulfilled, as you said. I mean, just your answer to that question, like to our listeners, if you can't answer it something like what Erik did, which is you feel fulfilled and you're doing God's work. I think that is just that's it right there. It's all about that. So I appreciate it so much. This was so valuable. Erik, how can people find out more about you?
Yeah, thanks, brother. Appreciate that. If this resonated with you, and you want to hear more, you can just email me directly, Erik, ERIK, @onairbrands.com. You know, you want to jam, set up some time together, see how I can help you. But yeah, I did launch my YouTube channel. It's funny because the cobbler's kids have no shoes. That was definitely the case with me. So we recently launched my new show called Be Your Brand. You can find me, Erik Cabral Brand, on YouTube. And yeah, give us a like. Give us a subscribe. That'd be awesome.
Erik, this has been great. Again, you're like, every time I do an episode, I get I learned so much from these, and I learned so much today, and you got my wheels spinning. So thank you for that. I appreciate, again, spending the time with me, helping me, but with our listeners, I know they appreciate too. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, brother, and giving me the opportunity.
For the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast, we are signing off. Thank you for listening to the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Muller Real Estate, visit our website at www.mullerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.